And welcome to another episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Stables Media. I'm Taylor Phillips along with Ed Smith. Frank Vashner will join us a bit later on. My opening statement, the Wolverines and Spartans keep climbing up the AP top 25 rankings in college football, while the Lions are still too busy being the Lions rather than rebonding with Megatron. Ed, what is your opening statement?
My opening statement from what I've seen this week is that, well, for the Lions, it's already time to look forward to next season. As for Michigan and Michigan State, particularly the Spartans, the focus is definitely should be pertaining to now instead of the future. That's for sure.
All right, yeah. Also, hockey's around the corner too, and we got a Red Wings update as well. But before we begin, this show and all our segments are sponsored by the Vigor Sports mobile app, where great fans cover. Download it from the Apple App Store or Google Play. Sign up and type in the referral code STABLES for Stables Media. Also, a shout out to Cali Tickets for sponsoring the Detroit Sports Rag, created by Jeff Moss. You can follow him on Twitter at HowAboutIt91. You can also visit his website, DetroitSportsRag.com. Visit CaliTickets.com or call 877-225-8425 to purchase tickets to go see one of their featured events. Let's start with the Michigan Wolverines. They just absolutely destroyed former Spartan Rocky Lombardi and the Northern Illinois Huskies 63-10. I know Northern Illinois is a team in the American Conference, but my God, Michigan just lit it up offensively, even without Ronnie Bell. Ed, what are your thoughts on that? Not much, huh?
Not much as what needs to be stated, because this is a game and this is a team that Michigan was supposed to thoroughly dominate, and they did that and then some. So much so that you were able to see quarterbacks getting switched out at halftime and J.J. McCarthy getting some reps in as Cade McNamara was able to get some rest. So much so that besides the usual performance that you saw from Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins, you even saw Donovan Edwards get in on the action, showing you a glimpse of what he's going to bring you for years to come for that Wolverines offense, particularly at the running back position, which, if you're Mike Hart, you very much be very happy to have the dilemma of having multiple options at that running back spot to hand the ball off to. Knowing you have reliable players such as Corum, such as Haskins, and of course such as Edwards as well. But particularly on Blake Corum, what we've seen him do so far. Now, I understand the whole usual spiel about around this time of year when you see a Michigan player having a breakout season or a breakout month at the start of the season. The phrase September Heisman gets thrown around a lot, and for good or bad reasons, it's there. You can't deny it, you can't escape it. If you want to say that Blake Corum is this year's September Heisman for the Wolverines, you can go ahead right and say it. I'm not going to chastise you for thinking that type of thought, because we've seen before, whether it be from Tate Forcier or Denard Robinson, for certain examples, players that have great starts to their season, so much so that you want to say, hey, you want to put them as the Heisman dark horse candidate. Whereas the rest of the season doesn't really pan out in terms of that hype and attention, primarily because the team itself isn't able to get off the type of production as you would have seen, in terms of against cupcake teams such as this. But still, the focus shouldn't be more so on that, but also really on how what the offense has been doing so far this season, how to make improvements, making strides, making adjustments, making changes for this season compared to last season. I think seeing an effective rushing attack, first and foremost, is something that Jim Harbaugh would have preferred to see anyway, knowing that there's an inexperience factor when it comes to your quarterback. Either one, depending on whether it was McNamara or McCarthy or whoever. So I think when you see the running backs doing what they do, it takes that pressure off of your quarterback for having to try to do so much or do so much with just his arm by himself. Now, eventually, there's going to be games, there's going to be times and situations where you need to rely on your quarterback to come through for you, just in case the running game may not be up to stuff for that particular week, or it's been well scouted and well neutralized by the opposing team's defense, which I suspect we will see in future games upcoming, namely Wisconsin, namely Penn State, namely Michigan State, and namely Ohio State. For example, those are four big games to where, while it's great to have your running game being as super effective as it is now, you're still going to have to rely on your quarterback to come through when you need him in certain moments, in certain situations. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. In terms of, I think it's a brief note to mention. You mentioned Rocky Lombardi, how he is, was with the Spartans. Now he is here with Northern Illinois. I believe last season, since he was with Michigan State, he was able to come in here and pull off that upset win over the Wolverines. As we see Frank joining in, nice to see you, my man.
Thank you, gentlemen.
But so I think I think it'll be not too far fetched to say that this was a little bit of a gem of payback that was in the back of the minds of these Michigan players, especially those that were here for that dreadful year last season, and now have a chance a bit of a comeback and redeem themselves, so to speak. I wouldn't necessarily call it a revenge tour like you did the 2018 team, because that ended poorly at the end. But I call this a redemption tour of sorts, because you still went 2-4, got embarrassed by Michigan State, got embarrassed by Wisconsin, didn't even play Ohio State due to COVID reasons as well. So all that has been in the back of their minds, I'm sure, not just for Coach Harbaugh and his staff, but also some of these players who decided to come back to Michigan, whether it be, to stuck it out instead of transferring or leaving school early to go to the NFL, or whatever the case may be. They came back for a reason. So with this 3-0 start, knowing that Big Ten season is now about to start as well, I think this is where they sharpen their focus. They're not getting too ahead of themselves. They know there's still work to accomplish. I like that mentality if you're a Michigan Wolverines fan. I think, like I said, the first real true big test is going to come in a couple of weeks. Not next week against Rutgers, but for sure when you face Wisconsin on the road, likely going to be a primetime game. Those fans are going to be wanting blood. So you have to prepare yourself to be as mentally sharp and focused as you possibly can, because that is your first two big tests as to determine how is this season going to play out. And it's only going to play out not by how others think or see or how they play, but how Michigan plays. They have that amongst themselves of what they can do, basically determine their own fate. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. But, we still got to see what happens when they get there. But I still like the preparation as we see, seeing what they do against Washington, seeing what they did against Western Michigan, which frankly, Western Michigan looks to be a better team at the moment than what we've seen of the past other two opponents, including Washington and now here in Northern Illinois. But still, you're not focused on strength of schedule or this and that in terms of wanting to get little tidbits of potential playoff push or whatever. You're focusing on the team that's ahead of you, the schedule that you got to play, and knowing that, you want to do something, have some type of damn impact on this Big Ten conference, maybe compete for a championship or at least get to the damn championship game this season as opposed to years past. So
that's the goal. That is the goal. And another one bites the dust. Frank, not much to analyze, like I told Ed.
Well, I mean, from what I noticed from that game, Michigan pretty much stuck to what's been their bread and butter for the first three games, and that's running the football with Blake Corum, Hassan Haskins, and mixing a little bit of Donovan Edwards. So I think they stuck to that. I do think come Big Ten play that Caden McNamara is going to have to play better at quarterback. I mean, he's the 14th best in terms of passer efficiency rating in the conference, and let's be honest, that's not going to cut it against the Wisconsins and the Penn States and the Ohio States of the world. Mm-hmm. So I think come Saturday against Rutgers, I have to wonder if Josh Gaddis is willing to kind of turn him a little bit more loose. I'd like to know what Ed thinks about that. But also, you mentioned the Wisconsin game being the first big test. I do know that is actually a noon kick on Fox, so tune in for that one. Go
ahead, Ed. Rutgers. I believe that's a 3:30 start.
No, I was talking about the Wisconsin game.
Oh, Wisconsin
in a couple
game.
weeks. Ed mentioned it was possibly a primetime game, but it's actually a nooner.
That makes sense
Oh, yeah.
because of the whole, TV contract schedule between Fox and the Big Ten. So that makes sense. You mentioned about turning McNamara loose. I thought there was some instances where he was able to get more, he was given more freedom, more freelance this week compared to what we saw against Washington. That's what I want to see moving forward, especially, once we have some of these big games coming up. Trusting your quarterback to be more than that game manager that we usually see with Harbaugh-led quarterbacks, whether it be here with Jake Rudolph and Wilson Spade, or even when he was with it at San Francisco and had Alex Smith before he discovered Colin Kaepernick, for example. So I like what Frank was mentioning about turning the keys loose, so to speak, on McNamara. We saw that a little bit in this game. You want to see that more, especially with Rutgers coming up, so that by the time we get to Wisconsin and all these other big games, like I mentioned, Penn State, MSU, OSU, he's more comfortable in realizing, hey, you know what? You need to go out there, get this first down for us, move this drive for us, get us this touchdown, do whatever you can to at least keep us in the game, because there may be instances where our defense isn't going to always be at our best. So this is where we need to rely upon you, our quarterback, per se, not just the running game, but specifically our quarterback. Hey, keep us in this fight so that way when it's time to win, we'll have a fighting chance.
Yeah. Yeah, got to keep fighting. So, speaking of the Rutgers game, like I mentioned, it's a 3:30 p.m. Eastern time kickoff on ABC. The number 19 Michigan Wolverines, yes, they've climbed up to it. Previously, they were ranked 25th going into the Northern Illinois game, but now they're 19th. They got Rutgers Saturday at 3:30. I'm going to catch that one as well. So let's start off with our Vigor predicted scoring prediction, but with analysis. As always, Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Frank. Ed, go ahead.
Depending on what we see and what Rutgers usually do, I don't think it's going to be as bad as, what was it, the 76-0 game that it was a few years back in 2016, where you had like Jabril Peppers going off and all that sort of thing. I think we're going to see at least a little bit more fight from Rutgers this time around. It's still going to be bad. This team is still going to get walloped. I don't think it's going to be as bad as what we saw them do against Northern Illinois. I think it'll be more similar in the vein to what we saw against Washington. Defense will do what they have to do. I think the offense will obviously get on a much faster start in this game compared to that game. You're going to do proper comparisons. But the end result will still be the same. Your three-headed monster running back would be Corum, Haskins, and Edwards. More so the first two. I think Edwards will get his reps in the second half, like we saw here in this game. So again, I think it'll be more of a mirror image of what we saw in the Northern Illinois game, but not too much, because it's all about getting your reps, but also having your key players healthy when it's time to face Wisconsin. So in terms of overall what I think the game is going to look like, my Vigor predicted score is going to be, I'll say, Michigan 49, Rutgers 14. Rutgers will probably get like an early score in the first half and then get a garbage time touchdown late in the game. But yeah, 49-14 is my Vigor predicted score. Michigan gets the victory.
49-14, Michigan, says Ed. Frank, you're up next.
Well, I do have to say that this isn't the Rutgers of years past that was a complete dumpster fire in the Big Ten. Greg Schiano has really gotten them turned around, going in the right direction. I mean, we even saw it somewhat last year where they were kind of a pain to play against, and they basically go into a game against Ohio State and say, hey, we got nothing to lose, and they'd be pulling out a double pass on a punt and catching you off guard. So I don't think Michigan can afford to overlook this game. They've got to come out laser focused. And, from everything I've read about Rutgers, they're going to be that team, the Big Ten, that, yeah, you can beat them, but man, are they a pain in the butt to play against. So I think this one will be in the neighborhood of 38-17. Michigan wins. Rutgers will have it close. It'll probably be a 1-2 score game. I could see it in the fourth quarter early before a steady diet of Corum, Haskins, or Edwards just kind of grinds out a win for the Wolverines. So I'll go 38-17 for my Vigor predicted score.
So basically, what you're saying is, Frank, be on the lookout for how this may look early as potential trap game because you don't want to look ahead too much to Wisconsin. But
Bingo.
over the course of the game, they should be able to handle their stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Because,
Mhm.
like I said, Rutgers is not the pushover that they once were.
Good point. Good point. I'm going to range this and go Michigan 45, Rutgers 20. Yeah, that's my Vigor predicted scoring prediction. Michigan will still have the offense. Rutgers, like Frank mentioned, Greg Schiano, their head coach, he's turned this team around. But I just think Michigan's offense will be too much, especially in Ann Arbor at the Big House, Michigan Stadium. So 45-20 is my Vigor predicted scoring prediction. Now for the biggest upset of the weekend in our eyes. The Michigan State Spartans upset the Miami Florida Hurricanes on the road 38-17, and Michigan State earned that 20th spot in the AP College Football Top 25 rankings. Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Frank. Just a hard-fought victory, and Michigan State just pulled away in the fourth quarter. It was a doozy in the first three quarters, but Michigan State took advantage of mistakes, and they just kept on tearing away at those Canes.
Absolutely. I think this was a determination. This game was decided on two key factors. What MSU did in that fourth quarter, knowing how this was a close ball game, a tight ball game throughout, how they pulled away with relative ease, and also how they were what partially fueled that was turnovers, which is ironic because in the past couple of years we've seen Miami and that defense build up a reputation amongst themselves as being, these ball hawks, with the we're turnover U, the U is back, and they got the turnover chain and the props and all that. So to see that being turned around and used against them was a bit of a pleasant surprise, especially if you're a Spartan fan. Now, if you want to say maybe Miami was a little bit overrated coming into the season, you could potentially say that, knowing how they got absolutely dominated by Alabama and they have barely squeaked by a win against Appalachian State of all teams. I know, Michigan fan criticizing a team barely beating Appalachian State. Note the irony. But anyway, as it pertains to this game, the turnovers were obviously a huge factor. How about Peyton Thorne? The young kid going 18 of 31, going 261 yards, 4 touchdowns, not a single interception. Kenneth Walker continuing. You want to talk about September Heisman's? I think after Blake Corum, Kenneth Walker's name should be damn near on that list as well. No, he didn't have a rushing touchdown, but he did have a receiving touchdown to go along with his 27 carries and 172 yards. So this young man is carrying the workload. He's being that workhorse for that MSU offense. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how other teams, primarily Michigan, coming up in the next few weeks, are going to game plan about trying to neutralize Walker at the very least. So that way it forces MSU to find another route, another way to try, gain production through their offense to beat you. But in terms of what they did this game, they were still able to execute to perfection, won the turnover battle, didn't make mistakes, nowhere near the amount of mistakes as Miami made. And like I said, between that fourth quarter, I think it's just a matter of they're definitely believing in what Mel Tucker is saying. I think that's obvious. I think when you see your players respond like this to what you're doing and the team in general, take note to what you're trying to install in them, whether it be culture, you want to call that. This is year 2 of the Mel Tucker era, and it seems like this rebuild, if you want to call it that, they're well ahead of schedule. They beat Michigan last year. They're already off to a great start. This is their first 3-0 start since 2015, I believe. That was the same year, if I'm not mistaken, that they had made the playoff. Now, obviously, nobody is expecting or saying Michigan State is going to the college football playoff this year. That's far out of the realms of realistic expectation. But
and too early to tell.
Exactly. But considering where this team had been in the past, at least I want to say, what, the last 2 or 3 years, the final days of the D'Antonio era, and compared to what they've done now at the start with Mel Tucker, bravo! You can't do nothing else but tip your hat to them and give them kudos and props, because it's not easy to pull that off. Ask Dan Campbell. It's not easy to pull off a transformation this quick and this early. So absolute props to Mel Tucker for what, and his staff, for getting his players in the right motion to buy into his system. And if you want to say, outperform their expectations or overachieve, that's fine. But I look at that as a positive light as rather as a negative light. And what they were able to do, it's quite astounding. And while I don't expect them to be competing for the Big Ten title this year, I would say definitely look out for them to be some party crashers for later this year and going into next year and beyond, for sure.
Yep, just working their way up. Only time will tell. Frank, you loved that one.
Oh,
that was
yes,
amazing.
Yes, I did. I mean,
that's why you got your shirt on.
Oh yeah. Well, when I had to turn it on in the radio after I got done doing youth football, and I heard that Michigan State was ahead, and then they had
I listened to it as well.
Yeah, they forced a couple of turnovers. I'm thinking, oh, well, they're giving Miami a taste of their own medicine. And, of course, 4 takeaways as well, 2 fumble recoveries, and 2 interceptions. My biggest takeaway from this is you're seeing the mindset of this Michigan State team, at least from an offensive standpoint and play calling standpoint. Because I think under D'Antonio in this type of game, he'd want to play trestle ball, just run, bleed the clock, and down as much as you can, and if all else, punt and play defense. Mel Tucker, different story. Up by 7 points late, we just get a first down. We're dialing up a kill shot and going for the dagger right there, as we saw that with Peyton Thorne connecting with Jalen Naylor for what was essentially putting the game out of reach.
And they got it.
Yeah. I mean, even Thorne, I've been very impressed with the last couple of games. And it's 4 touchdown passes each. And, of course, no interceptions. He's taking care of the football. He's making his throws and all that. Kenneth Walker, another big day. I mean, he didn't score a rushing touchdown, but a receiving touchdown. That is actually the 3rd game in a row that Michigan State has scored with a halfback screen. That's 3 straight games. You never saw that in the D'Antonio era, so I have to give a tip of my hat to Jay Johnson, the offensive coordinator, for at least saying, hey, we got guys who are dangerous in space, and let's use them. And as for the defense, I've really been wanting to see more out of their secondary players, and I did see that with Angelo Gross getting a pick and also Ronald Williams, because we saw that there were some issues early on against Northwestern and Youngstown State. Well, I think those guys are just continuing to get better as the season goes on. And now they're going to be tested probably against Nebraska as well. So hopefully another big game, which I'm sure we'll get to. But as for being ranked number 20, I agree with it. So let's just keep moving forward. The win is good. But you know what? You got another one coming up, and the season's going to get tougher.
Yeah. Let's focus on the Big Ten season. And speaking of Nebraska, Michigan State takes on Nebraska at Spartan Stadium Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on FS1, number 20 against Nebraska. And let's analyze and predict with our predicted scoring predictions. Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Frank. Ed, what is your Vigor predicted scoring prediction with analysis, please?
Well, in terms of what this game comes down to, I think it's going to come down to who can establish the running game more. That's going to help determine who will help win this game. I think between Nebraska and Michigan State, these are 2 teams that have offenses, or rather not so much establishing the run, but who can establish their best strategy, offensive strategy first. Nebraska, they prefer throwing the ball down the field on you. MSU, they prefer running the ball up and down the field on you. So Nebraska, with their rushing defense, they've only allowed just a barely smidge over 156 rushing yards per game. Contrast that to what MSU has been doing of getting over 260 yards on the ground per game so far. So Nebraska's rush defense versus MSU's running game. That's going to be one big matchup to see. And also, can MSU keep up with what they've been doing with the takeaway department, having the plus minus advantage on takeaways and turnovers, and also not having that mental come down, so to speak, after getting such a big win and then following up by a lackadaisical performance the following week. Now, with this being at home, with this being a 7 p.m. under the lights type of scenario, maybe you would expect in front of a fired up home crowd that MSU should be able to take care of business. But I do not think this will be as easy as it was against Miami. I know Nebraska is going with their own issues. May not be as good of a team on paper per se, but they did have a close outing against Oklahoma recently. So they may be looking to be using that as motivating fuel to help charge an upset win of their own, the same way MSU did against Miami. So if you want to call this a potential trap game, so to speak, you can. But I think MSU, with the momentum that they're on right now and knowing they're at home, knowing the type of players that they have, I expect this to be close to at the first half throughout some part of the second half, but eventually MSU pulls away and they'll get the job done. So my bigger predicted score is going to be Michigan State 28, Nebraska 18.
That's close. 28-18, Michigan State, says Ed. Frank, what about you? What's your Vigor predicted scoring prediction for MSU and Nebraska?
Well, first off, I do agree with Ed that this is a potential trap game. You're coming off of that high of opening up a can on Miami, and now you're coming back home, and you can't overlook Nebraska too, because this is a team that I think is going to be somewhat desperate. I mean, everyone knows that Scott Frost is on the hot seat. His seat's probably hotter than what Jim Harbaugh's is. That's another topic for another time. So, I mean, they're probably going to be coming in with their backs against the wall. Now, that said, will the real Nebraska Cornhuskers please stand up? Or are we going to see the Nebraska team that got throttled by Illinois in the first game of the season, or the team that actually went tooth and nail with Oklahoma before falling late? I mean, I think it's going to be more the latter. They're going to fight and battle. They're going to try and stop the run, but I don't think they're going to be able to. I think it's going to be another good performance from Kenneth Walker, or he'll probably get it in the end zone at least once, running the ball, maybe even receiving. And I think as long as Peyton Thorne takes care of the football like he has, I think Michigan State will win by a score of, I'll say 34-21. That'll be my Vigor predicted score. 34-21 Michigan State wins.
34-21 MSU, says Frank. A bit more of a high-scoring affair, I'd say. I'm going to go Michigan State 31 and Nebraska 20. 31-20 MSU. See, I arranged that one again. So those are Vigor predicted scoring predictions for MSU and Nebraska. Now to pro football, and same old Lions, right? They lose to the Green Bay Packers 35-17 on Monday Night Football. Lambeau Field dropped to 0-2. They led 17-14 at halftime. It was a fight. The first half was a fight. But the second half, the Lions their wheels just fell off. Too many bad decisions, a fumble lost by Jared Goff. He fumbled the ball twice, recovered his second one at least. But the Lions, most fans who had subscribed to Joe Madden Sports for picking the Lions to score under 17.5 points, and they got only 17. And shout out to Joe Madden and Joe Madden Sports, by the way. But second half, they didn't even score a point. The Lions didn't. Yeah. And this is just same old Lions right there. So, Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Frank. Ed, your take on your analysis.
Well, there's a lot to go into. I would say this was a tale of two halves, so to speak. You got to mention of how the game started at the very least for Detroit. By them taking their opening drive of the game, going down the field and scoring a touchdown right out the gate. I thought that was a pleasant surprise. I thought between Jared Goff having the performance that he had, not just in that opening drive, but also in the first half in general, he threw only one incomplete pass, or actually about a couple incomplete passes, but those were just throwaway passes. For the most part, he was relatively on target and perfect for that first half, with a little exception of either an intentional grounding opportunity or him just getting out of harm's way to throw the ball away to avoid an unnecessary potential turnover. I wish he had followed that line of advice later on in the game, but we'll get to that. The offense itself, I liked how they were in rhythm. Green Bay's defense still being god awful compared to them getting lit up by famous Jameis and the Saints last week. But in terms of what they did for this week in this game, the Lions offense, they were in good rhythm. Keeping Green Bay's defense on edge, mixing up the play calling. I thought Anthony Lynn did a solid job in that first half, mixing in runs and passes, using play action, getting Jared Goff involved, getting him comfortable. And also, worth noting, that offensive line, particularly one Penei Sewell, I'm telling you, the more and more we see of this kid week by week. We saw what he did last week against Nick Bosa, who, by the way, showing you how damn good of a job that Sewell did against him. Bosa was an absolute monster this past weekend against the Eagles. Even so much so when you consider that he himself gave Sewell his props for what he did against him last week. So that's what you call an example of recognized game. So in terms of Sewell himself, the more we see him do what he does best week after week, and how comfortable he is doing it at the left tackle spot, the more I'm finding it difficult to potentially, once Taylor Decker returns, I'm finding it more and more difficult of wanting to have to move Sewell back over to the right tackle spot. I know, and ideally, you want to have, in terms of on paper, the best possible lineup for your offensive line. But I'm just telling you right now, for Sewell's progress and progression, for what he's doing just in his rookie year alone, to me, I would just keep him at left tackle. That's just that would seem like a keep it simple, stupid type of solution to where you see what he's doing, what he's done best. Just, don't stifle that development and just keep him at left tackle. If you want to say, again, that's wishful thinking of telling Taylor Decker, who's been more adjusted, even though, yes, he did do more at right tackle in college at Ohio State than Sewell did at college against, for Oregon. I think it is quite of a shift, a seismic shift, to ask Taylor Decker when you come back from injury. Oh yeah, by the way, this rookie just took your spot. You're moving over to the right side. So I think that may be of a culture shock, so to speak, for Decker. So it wouldn't surprise me if they move Sewell back over to the right side. I just think, knowing how comfortable and how just dominant he's been on the left tackle spot, it may be a mistake to move over back to the right side. But still, I digress. The offense was doing well. Mixing in runs, we saw Jamal Williams. This was a little bit of a motivation payback revenge game for him, knowing how he got cut by the Packers. He was having productive runs early on. It was nice seeing him and Deandre Swift. Both guys have been dealing with their own respective injuries as of late. They came in, they got the ball, they were fed the rock, and they were moving. That's what you want to see. You don't want to see, you don't mind seeing those little chunk plays, 10, 15-yard bursts every now and then, but still, you like to see productive runs where on first and second down, they're getting the ball and getting you into manageable third down situations for your quarterback. That's what you want to see. So there were positives in that, as well as, how can I forget to mention TJ Hawkinson? Oh my goodness. I think I remember seeing a tweet online about, so to speak, even coming into this game, how Hawkinson was having more of an offensive production than, say, the likes of even George Kittle. And that's saying something. And that continued even more with him getting the receptions that he had, key situations, third down, moving the chains, and also that beautiful dime of a throw that Goff threw towards the back of the end zone that only Hawkinson could and would be able to get that touchdown. By the way, quick worth note mentioning, I think this was what Deandre Swift in terms of what he was doing in terms of early to the start of his career. He's already got over 1,000 yards from all-purpose from scrimmage. That shows his versatility. That shows what he contributed to the offense, and that shows of what how much of a weapon that he can be in that offense. So good for him. I say that because it reminded me of what Hawkinson did last week in gaining his 100th career reception already. He's already, we see. I think you're starting to see him slowly show little by little, week by week, of how maybe it wasn't so much of a bad idea taking him top 10 overall in the draft the way we did, because I think because us fans we got PTSD of flashbacks to Eric Ebron once we heard that announcement, like, oh God, here we go again, and to a lesser extent Brandon Pettigrew. But now seeing Hawkinson doing what he does, making reliable catches, being efficient, not having back-breaking drops, and also doing what he does in terms of helping run block as well. Hawkinson has been proving to be at least one good thing that Bob Quinn got right. So thank you, I guess. So if you want to say that, that'd be like saying, Ken Holland getting credit for drafting Dylan Larkin. Duh, of course. But between that, there was the good part of what the offense was doing, as well as the defense. Knowing that Aaron Rodgers was going to do his usual stuff, he was still, though, I thought, if you want to say working out the kinks, you can't say that because of how horrible he looked last week against the Saints, and how he came into this first half of this one. It didn't have that same typical, the fear of God stricken into me type of fear that I would have usually had in terms of watching Rodgers play this team in the past. So that was something that was different. And I think you could feel that, and the team felt that as well. So those were the positives. That's what led to them, having that 3-point lead in the first half. Then came the second half, and the one thing that was negatively impacting the Lions in the first half reared its ugly head even more in the second half, and that was penalties and flags and giving up third down conversions, especially on one instance when you had a 3rd down and 14 and you give up 15 yards. Come on. Like, that's examples of where you got to trust your defense to get the hell off the field, so that way, A, you can get rest, and B, your offense can continue, doing what they're supposed to do and staying in rhythm themselves. Because in that third quarter, once Green Bay effectively took over and never looked back, the Lions offense only got 9 snaps with the football. 9.
Just 9.
That's it. And between, Green Bay and that offense being methodical and tiring that defense out, moving down the field once they got fully adjusted, I think more so to the fact that our linebacking core continues to be absolutely terrible. And also the fact that our only good corner, it seems, Melifonwu, he got hurt. So I was like, crap, you already lost Okudah for the season. Now your other, or I would say your best corner, because Melifonwu had been being flat out. He's been better than Okudah this year. Now, then he got hurt. So once that happened, I was like, "Yep, it's open season. Rodgers is gonna tear us apart," and that's exactly what happened. And between that and the third down conversions and the penalties, I was like, that was his absolute recipe for disaster. And then you top it all off with the cherry on top, which was Jared Goff. Well, first we'll get to the fumble, but first, this was the absolute turning point of the game. When Detroit, they got the ball back, it was 21-17. They're moving the ball down the field. They're deep in the Packers territory. You get the 4th down and 1, and you're inside Green Bay's 30. To me, and I think a lot of other people, I think yourself included, Taylor, I would have taken the points. I just would have taken the field goal to give me a guaranteed spot, that just in case Green Bay goes back down the field and score again, which obviously they did, it's still a one-possession game. It's still 28-20. Whereas here, you lose the ball, turnover on downs, and then they score anyway. Now, instead of a one-possession game, it's 2-possession, and it's essentially game over from that point on. I understand what Dan Campbell was trying to do. I like from the mentality standpoint, And when you look back on that play call itself, it really wasn't a bad idea. However, the execution here by the players is what's key here. That's what led to the downfall. And unfortunately, as much as you want to give him credit for how well the team was doing in the
Lack
first half,
thereof.
yeah, as well as you got to give him credit
Goff's
for how
throw
the
was
team.
off target. The receiver
Exactly.
had nothing
Exactly.
to do but dive for it.
Yeah, I was just getting to that. As much as you want to give Jared Goff credit for what he did in the first half, you got to give him his blame for what he didn't do in the second half. That 4th down and 1 where he had at least 2, if not 3 guys open over the middle. Hawkinson, St. Brown, and Swift. You had 3 of those guys with a relatively, if not completely wide open, at least relatively open, where you're going to dump the ball off to them. Easy pickup, first down, move the change, keep the momentum going. Instead, you try a back shoulder throw, to the sideline,
In the flat.
on the flat with Cephas, who, granted, he had a good game. He had a touchdown grab at the start, and he almost had a spectacular. He almost pulled an Odell Beckham with a one-handed grab touchdown himself. But still, that's not the route you go on the 4th one when you have at least 2, if not 3 guys open over the middle. Especially when what Goff is not known to me making these type of back shoulder type of throws. That's something you expect Matthew Stafford to do, but not Jared Goff. Jared Goff is your, check down, dink and dunk type of dude. And frankly, the way it played out, it was tailor-made for him to make that throw. And unfortunately, whether if he was stuck on his read, which is again one of his problems, whether it be focusing on your first read of your receiver too much, and or B, letting pressure getting to you, so that you start getting the happy feet doing the salsa dance, which is going to disrupt your rhythm and how you throw and deliver the ball. Both of those came into effect in this game, and we saw one of those come into effect on that 4th down, and that was just the turning point because Green Bay, they take the ball right back. That's against already tired defense. Go right back down the field, score a touchdown. And then to top it all off, Goff, oh my goodness, I understand it's raining. The rain was coming down. But still, you got to be prepared to get that, at least handle the damn snap to hand off. So
And he didn't.
once you fumble the snap, you fumble the ball, Green Bay gets it right back. I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's the game right then and there. I essentially tuned out mentally for that 4th quarter because I knew the way they were going, they just were not going to come back because now Green Bay was in full, the crowd, they were into it. They got them amped up and fired up. There was just no way there was just no way that Green Bay was blowing that lead. So between, that 4th and 1, then the ensuing touchdown, and then the Goff fumble, that ended the game for all intents and purposes right then and there. And, I understand, Taylor, what you mentioned yourself earlier about how this had a same old Lions type of feel. Well, don't tell that to Dan Campbell because, he mentioned that in the post game, and I'm just quoting him by his own words. I don't want to see that bleep. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to sulk about it, which I understand the message of what he's trying to do. You don't want to have that creep into your players' heads, to where that disrupts them mentally, and then that can led to further disruption throughout the rest of the team, throughout the remainder of the schedule. But here's the facts. This is still a roster that was left in shambles by what Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia had done. So it's going to take time to adjust and get all that turnover and root all that out. It's what you saw the Red Wings do. It's what you saw the Tigers do. It's what you're seeing the Pistons do. It's just the Lions' turn now to get into that rebuild phase of improving their roster. You like the pieces that they added offensively, but that defense, oh my God, the linebacking's terrible. Your secondary, I like Melifonwu, but he got hurt. You hope he's not done. He can come back soon. Okuda, even though you don't want to label him a bust, he looked to have strides. He looked to get better this season. He's now gone for the year. So there's still lots of what you got to do from that defense, not just the defensive line. Sure, add a little bit more to the defensive line, but you've got to work on that linebacking and secondary core. Your back seven is an absolute garbage heap right now. and you got to work on improving that. And I think Dan Campbell knows that. That's where he's going to lead to his GM Brad Holmes to do. But for Coach Campbell, this is about getting his players focused mentally on the field. So I understand what he was doing. Right, you just tell them, right, you don't want to see that stuff. You don't want to sulk about it. You move on to the next game. You have established that in your mentality, that fighter's mentality, that kneecap mentality. We saw that on perfect display against San Fran. We saw that in the first half here against Green Bay. But it comes down at the end of the day, you can have that right mentality all the live long day. But if you don't have the right talent and your roster is not built up to proper standards to fit your scheme, what you want to do with your team, you're going to have a rough time. And as we're going to see throughout the course of this season and this schedule, it's not going to get easier. So there's going to be plenty of rough times and rough moments for this team upcoming. So buckle up, fans. You're going to be lucky. Like I mentioned, you're going to be lucky if this team wins more than 3 games. I'm just telling you guys right now.
Yeah, and you predicted 3 wins, 3-14, to preview the Lions season a while ago. And yeah, and I agreed with you too. So Frank, your turn, and then we'll preview the Baltimore Ravens, and it'll be ugly. Go ahead.
Well,
oh
hard
God,
hard to follow up what Ed said, because look, I did happen to catch a little bit of that first half, and I do have to give a ton of credit to the Lions offensive line, especially Penei Sewell, for the job he's done in his first 2 games. And that further emphasizes my point. He has to stay at left tackle. I know this organization wants to move him to right. I think you're past that point now. He's best suited playing the left side. Leave him there. I mean, look, if you don't want to move Taylor Decker to right tackle, ask him to move to right guard, or left guard, because Jonah Jackson's the right guard, and then have him play over Halapoulivaati Vaitai, who I think is a little bit overpaid. Either you do that, or you possibly trade Decker, and you probably get some nice return for him, like a first-round pick from a contending team. So, and as for the defense, all I have to say is this defense is probably going to be worse than last year's, and last year's was worse than the 0-16 season. And I think in the next 2 years, you're not going to see a single starter out there that was starting the first couple of games. I don't think anyone would start anywhere else for any other team. I mean, Elfanu, he's their best corner. I'm not so sure he'd be a starter on any other team. He'd be a backup, probably play nickel at some spots. But, it is what it is. Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes inherited a huge mess to begin with. So they have my patience, and I'm sure they've got Ed's patience and Taylor's patience as well. So give them time. Let it build up. It's going to be a long season. The end result's going to be ugly. But you want to see the young guys continue to develop and get better as the season goes on. It's not going to translate to wins. We saw the Pistons do that, and it's paid dividends. The Red Wings did the same thing, and even the Tigers have done it too. So there you go.
Yep. Now we preview the Baltimore Ravens at Ford Field Sunday at 1 on CBS. And our Vigor predicted scoring predictions are not going to be that pretty. But Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Frank. Ed?
Oh God. Okay, let's see. Now you dealt with what Aaron Rodgers, what he was going to bring to the table, and what he did bring. And now look who's next on your schedule. Oh, it's just nothing more but the modern day reincarnation of Michael Vick, former MVP Lamar Jackson, who just had himself a spectacular performance in primetime this past Sunday night against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. So knowing of the high that Lamar is going to be coming off of that game, is going to be going up and facing this defense. Oh my God. So expect to see some highlight reel plays being added to Lamar's resume. Expect to see more of the same of what you saw here. I think it's going to be more akin to what we saw against San Fran than what we saw against Green Bay. I think once they get ahead, once they jump to a lead, they're not going to look back. Lamar is going to do what he does best, and that's just that. I think it's so much more. You don't have to worry about Baltimore's defense giving up too much when, frankly, you know what to do against Jared Goff in this offense. Bring a little bit of pressure and cover your receivers deep, and that's all you need to do. This again, you're not facing Matthew Stafford, who can willingly just fling it down the field on you at any given moment's notice. So knowing that you're facing an offense, a different philosophy, different team with offensive philosophy and scheme, much more easier to schedule and scheme out your game plan if you're Baltimore's defense. But no, this is going to be more about the Lamar Jackson show, the Lamar Jackson show this Sunday at Ford Field. So knowing all that, knowing what's ahead of you, my Vigor predicted score is going to be, I will say, let's go Baltimore 35 and Detroit. They'll try to make it close late, try to get a couple garbage time touchdowns. They're going to show that kneecap mentality I mentioned before. They won't quit, but they're just not a good team, and they're not well-equipped roster, especially compared to the likes of Baltimore, who has different aspirations on their mind this season than what the Lions have. So my big predicted score is going to be Baltimore 35, Detroit 24.
All right. 35-24 Ravens beating the Lions, says Ed. Frank, what is your predicted score for Ravens at Lions?
Well, I think this one is going to get ugly real quick because, like I said, the Lions have nobody on their defense that would be a starter anywhere else. And Lamar Jackson is looking out at this defense like, okay, I'm in for a big game, passing and running the ball. Granted, he doesn't have his top 3 running backs available as they're all out with injury, but he's still Lamar Jackson. He can make plays with his feet. And, of course, guys you got to watch out for in the passing game, Hollywood Brown, Mark Andrews, and guys like that. That he's going to burn the Lions defense and eat them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And defensively for the Ravens, this isn't the unit that had Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs, or guys like that. But they're still a decent unit, and they're seeing a Lions offense that may or may not be up to par. So I think this one gets ugly quick, and I'll go Ravens 45, Lions 18 as they end up scoring late just to keep playing hard and make it respectable. But again, they don't have much to work with.
Right.
It's worth mentioning. I'm sorry, pardon the interruption. It's worth mentioning. You mentioned Frank. You mentioned Hollywood Brown, Marquise Brown, who's quickly becoming into a star developing receiver for the Ravens and a great weapon for Lamar Jackson. It's not surprising when you consider his bloodline. He is the cousin of the one and only Antonio Brown. Your fellow Chippewa Taylor. So knowing that, it's going to be quite interesting to see what Lamar does by himself, plus what Hollywood Brown does that secondary. Good Lord in heaven! If you're a fantasy team, I would definitely I would have a hard time choosing what am I going to do between. Well, no, not a hard time choosing quarterback, but I would have Lamar Jackson as my quarterback, and between guys like Hollywood Brown and also a little wily guy by the name of Cooper Kupp, I would be considering having those dudes on my fantasy team this week. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Well, for what it's worth, that I do have Lamar Jackson on one of my fantasy teams, as well as Mark Andrews.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Fair enough. Yeah, and Lamar Jackson's a Pro Bowler in my eyes. So
MVP candidate.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm going to go Ravens 49. I'm going to up the ante a little bit. Lions 21. So, yeah, Ravens 49, Lions 21. Those are Vigor predicted scoring predictions brought to you by the Vigor Sports mobile app. Now, we're not done with the Lions yet. Lions Hall of Fame wide receiver Calvin Megatron Johnson wants the Lions to pay him his $1.6 million signing bonus that they owe him to repair the relationship between both sides. And that is according to Graham Benziger. So, Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Frank. I think Calvin deserves better. But the Lions still not very caring about other people but themselves.
It is noticeable and noteworthy, comparing how they, they were amicable with their ending with the relationship with Matthew Stafford, and compared to how things went with Calvin Johnson and the aftermath of how things still going on now with Calvin Johnson. Because he's mentioned this not only to Graham Benzinger, but also to Pat McAfee as well. He's been asked about it, so he's being honest and telling us, what his honest feelings about it. And, I believe he should be getting that money back. When you consider the fact that, all the years, all the pain, all the blood, the sweat, the tears, the effort, everything that Calvin gave to this team and to this franchise, you know, busting his body up, messed up fingers, ankle injuries, knee injuries, back injuries, not to mention the untold amount of concussions he probably suffered as well. Um, you know, breaking his body for this pathetic team and franchise only to get what? This type of treatment after he retired. Basically, you're doing a repeat of what you did to Barry Sanders. Like, come on. At least when the Indianapolis Colts, when they ruined and absolutely killed Andrew Luck to the point where, listen, I can't do this crap anymore. He said, I'm out. I'm going to retire for my own safety and for my own sake. The Colts, guess what? Jim Irsay, I can say a lot of things about Jim Irsay, but guess what? He understood what that meant. So what did he do? He let Andrew Luck keep his damn money that he earned and that, frankly, that he paid the price for with his body and his health and everything else, and essentially his career. He let Andrew Luck keep his money. So why the hell can't the Lions do the same with Calvin? Come on now. It's just common sense. Just common damn sense here. It's not so much about the money itself. Trust me, Calvin is not broke. He could use that 1.6 million to do whatever the hell he wants to do. Set up his kids' college fund, whatever the case may be, or add it to future investments. I know he's doing great business. In terms of moving on to the cannabis side, being a cannabis businessman. Props to him. Hope all is well for him. But this is just more about symbolic of, hey, listen, why, you're seeing what Indianapolis and what other teams could have and have done with their guys. Why can't you do the same for me when I've arguably done, put my body through just as much, if not worse, for you guys, and not even win squat here. So where's the love? Where's the true love here? So it's not just so much about the money. It's about the symbolism behind it. And if you're going to disrespect Calvin like that, then I can see why he doesn't want to have anything to do with this team until, again, you rectify things. Chris Webber, to his extent, for all things you want to say about him, he wants things to get rectified between him and the University of Michigan. You already see that with him, how he did that with Jalen Rose. Now you want to see that in full circle with the school, with the university that he busted his ass for. That's just the same thing that Calvin wants for the Lions. That's all.
Yeah. Just give him the money. Frank?
Mm-hmm. That's really all I can say is just give him the money. It's money he earned. He put his body on the line for it. Just pay him the $1.6 million. Give him money, mend fences, and go on with life. Because, as I mentioned, Andrew Luck got all his money. Why can't Calvin Johnson get his?
Right.
Yeah, and it's not like the Ford family is exactly desperate to be hanging on to that 1.6 million at the moment. Okay, with their net worth, that'd be like the Illages asking for money back.
Yeah, except the Fords are trying to get away with fraud. Man, that is against the law, if you ask me. Telling the truth. But that being said, that's Lions. The Red Wings signed veteran forward Bobby Ryan to a professional tryout. Not much else to say there. Just a professional tryout, not a one-year contract, technically. But Ed, I think it's almost time for Bobby Ryan to retire.
Yeah, I think this is just a more so of giving them, the try to see what he has left in the tank. But it's getting to that time for sure.
Yeah. Frank?
I would agree with that. I mean, he's still trying to show he's got a little bit left in the tank. I don't think he's trying to get much money because he's still getting paid $3 million and change from the Ottawa Senators after they bought him out. But again, I thought he played decent when he was healthy last year, and unfortunately, he got hurt and had his season ended. So we'll see what comes of it. I'm not expecting too much.
All right. So that is everything we've covered. And now, what we have learned about what we've discussed tonight. What I've learned, the Lions have always been a dysfunctional NFL organization, not only with themselves, but also with their broken relationship with Calvin Megatron Johnson. Hopefully they have a change of heart and that gets resolved in the near future some point. But Michigan and Michigan State, they'll each have trap games on their hands, but they'll still both win. But all that being said, bring on hockey. And basketball too, but hockey's around the corner, followed by basketball. Ed, what did you learn?
What I learned from this week, from what I saw from this weekend's games, Michigan and Michigan State, they're on a far more stable condition of what the Lions are currently, both internally and outwardly as well. Michigan and MSU, they have aspirations of competing for a conference championship this year. The Lions, they're just competing for having aspirations of not going winless again this season. So, while two teams are clearly focused on what they want to do here in 2021, one team should already be focusing on what they got to do in 2022. In regards to other things that what I've learned, unfortunately we didn't have time to get the chance to mention them. You mentioned hockey and basketball around the corner. Let's not forget about the fact that we still got baseball going on. And our Detroit Tigers guys, 74-78, they have a damn good chance of getting close to, if not outright, finishing the season at 500. And knowing what this roster is and what they've had been throughout this year, knowing what AJ Hinch has done with less, it should have you pretty damn excited for what they can do in 2022 and beyond.
Yeah, and they beat the White Sox, Chicago, 5-3 today.
The first place White Sox, mind you. The first place White Sox. By the way, that the Tigers, that's now what? They're 7-3, 8-3 now against teams in first place this year. That's crazy.
Oh boy.
Considering what they've done since May and since the All-Star break, that's phenomenal. And again, I'm going to keep beating this drum. He won't win the award more than likely, but AJ Hinch deserves at least some votes for Manager of the Year for this year. So just imagine if he can do that this year, imagine what he can do with a better roster next season. Hint to Chris Illich.
Yeah. Frank, what did you learn about what we discussed tonight?
Well, what I've learned is the Lions are still dysfunctional and will seemingly continue to be as long as the Ford family owns the team. A quick mention about the Tigers. Yeah, they do have a great chance to finish at 500 or even above 500. But as for the two college football teams in the state, I think they're off to a much better start than I would have anticipated. I mean, if you would have told me that they'd both be 3-0 going into week 4, I would have said, I don't think that's going to happen. Well, it has. And honestly, I'll say they may be on a collision course to be meeting undefeated on October 30th in East Lansing. So that's going to be a fun day, fellas.
Man, I was going to mention that earlier.
Wouldn't that be something, especially if both teams are, let's say, are relatively ranked in or around the top 15 in the AP?
Yeah.
That's something that could happen.
20.
That's something
19 and 20.
And that's something that could happen. Let's say if Michigan beats Wisconsin and MSU handles their business, keep moving up the ranks, that's something that could happen. So, yeah, definitely watch this space when it comes to that game for sure.
Yeah, and even Michigan might have a chance at Ohio State. But hang on to your hats.
Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. I'll believe that when I see that. Yeah,
same
sure.
here.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
the closest we got was JT being short in 2016. That's it.
Yep, true. But that's what we've learned. And before we go, this show and all its segments are sponsored by the Vigor Sports mobile app, where great fans cover. Use the hashtag great fans cover. Download the app from the Apple App Store or Google Play. Sign up and type in the referral code STABLES with a capital S and the rest of the letters being lowercase, including the letter B in the middle, as in billionaire, for Stables Media. Also, a shout out to Cali Tickets for sponsoring the Detroit Sports Rag, created by Jeff Moss. Follow him on Twitter at HowAboutIt91 and visit his website, DetroitSportsRag.com, to visit his provocative, critical, and comprehensive articles. And visit CaliTickets.com or call 877-225-8425 to purchase tickets to go see one of their featured events. Gentlemen, excellent job as always. Our next episode, Sunday at 9 on the dot, p.m. Eastern Time. Until then, for Ed Smith and Frank Vashner, this is Taylor Phillips signing off. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DT2Phillips. Follow Ed Smith on Twitter and Instagram at EdSmith313. And follow Frank Vashner on Twitter and Instagram at Frank_Vashner. And follow our show on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Michigan_Truth. Like it on Facebook as the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast. And follow it on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening, watching, downloading, and sharing. And remember, the truth is out there. TTFN, ta-ta for now. Power to the people. Hit them with a high and we rest our case. Stay out of trouble.